Valley State University's Climate Change Education Solutions Network presents Miracle, Michigan Resources on Climate and Land Change Education, sponsored by the NASA Michigan Space Grant.
Over the past 100 years, Michigan on average has warmed 3 degrees. There are parts of the western UP that have warmed on average more than 10 degrees Fahrenheit.
Michigan as a whole has so much less snow in the winter.
I mean, even including this year, we got smacked with a heat wave of 90 degrees in the middle of May for about a week, and it cooled off into the 70s, and then it was right back in the 80s. And as you can see, like the grass, like we just haven't gotten much rain. I think that's what's really crazy to me, considering we have all this water all around us, and yet we just don't get the rain like we used to.
So even last year around this time, it was one of the record falls, one of the record autumns for heat, and it was coming off the heels of one of the wettest summers.
So already in the Midwest, we're seeing increased flooding as a result of climate change that's having impacts on our agricultural industries, on our power supply. We're going to see continued issues with shoreline flooding, homes falling in along the Great Lakes here as a result of variable water levels. So it's creating really unpredictable weather conditions already that are having serious economic impacts. Line 5 is only going to continue to worsen that.
We had a huge amount of ice on 2 occasions over the last 10 years, but the last 2 or 3 years has been minimal shore ice.
We are going to continue to see a forest species change. A lot of native forest trees require a sharp, hard freeze that lasts for most of the winter. And if they don't get that, they're not as strong, and they're more subject to being blown over. So it's likely that our native forests are going to change pretty dramatically, and that's going to change the flora and fauna that go with it.
But I think that it gives me hope that more voices are coming to the conversation, more perspectives, that the rising of the BIPOC community, indigenous movements that are totally transforming traditional thought about energy and resources and climate justice. And that gets me excited. And knowing that my kids are learning more today than I learned when I was their age, and that's power. That's the strength to really make a difference.
Enough time in the water to catch fish. If it was only in for 1 minute, we wouldn't have enough time. Very good.
It starts with Inland Seas and the program that they've developed since 1989, and the opportunity for students from schools starting the 4th grade up to come aboard and learn about the lakes. Many of them, 1, have never been on a boat. 2, they have no clue what the lake is all about. And once they get on board with the various programs we have, they begin to sense, better understand the relationship of the sun and the water, what's beneath the water, pollution, plastic.
But when you look at it, you think of the nastiest stuff, right? But it really smells like dirt, because that's mostly what it is. All right, we're gonna have most of the dirt, and it's gonna go through this screen. So let's see what's left. And what we're looking for is
until it's too heavy, right? And then the water can't push any more up. That balance between those forces is called buoyancy. say that one all together. Buoyancy.
One more time.
Buoyancy.
The way we teach isn't different than the way any good educator teaches. What makes it unique, what the secret sauce is I think the combination of factors. Being able to first connect kids, connect anyone to a Great Lake in such an intimate way, right? When you're sailing, when the wind, the breezes that are in some ways created by the water and the behaviors between the atmosphere and the water, when that's motoring them around a Great Lake body, that's such a unique thing. You're never going to forget it. So the place is a big piece of the puzzle. And then what we do aboard it is really engaging and experiential focus. To students, the fact that you counted 7 or 8 midge larvae at the end is an afterthought. The fact that they named them, also an afterthought. But the fact that you now know there's creatures in the mud in the bottom of a Great Lake is the piece that sticks with you. And I think the other piece is, I'm not tooting my own horn, but the staff and the volunteers. We have so many volunteers who choose to be part of this program, and they believe so passionately in being part of this, like, stewardship. So we tell every kid that arrives that you're going to be a scientist, you're going to be a sailor, and when you leave this ship, we hope you're going to be a steward for the Great Lakes. And I think that's it, because if it was just the activities themselves, we could do that in the exhibit hall. I could bring it to the classroom. I could do it with 30 kids. The teachers can do it. And when they do, it has meaning, right? It is really, really authentic and really powerful, but it's that like culmination of factors that makes that field trip so meaningful.
Actually, it's been a good thing for us. Back 15, 20 years ago, there was a lot of grape varietals, more specifically, in our case, Cabernet Sauvignon. People would have thought you'd be absolutely insane to plant that 20 years ago, and you would have been, because the weather pattern was just not favorable for it. Whereas there was a plot of, planted maybe 5 years ago, just test our vines to see if it would work, and it worked. And doubled down on it, and then we created, I think it was about 7 acres just of Cab Sauv, and that is really going to help us set us apart. Like, that is a red grape that a lot of people know, and it's been cool to see how many different grape varietals are able to grow up here. Sauvignon Blanc was one that somebody planted maybe 15 years ago, and people said they were crazy to plant Sauvignon Blanc, and that just blossomed, and now everybody has Sauvignon Blanc, or at least some sort of form of it now up here. The only issue right now, because we are really in a sweet zone of, it is ideal conditions to grow a ton of different vinifera. But the issue that we actually ran into last year is the seasons are longer, which is good because it allows grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon to ripen. However, you need temperature control, because especially for reds, there's a cold soak period, which is where you basically just crush the grapes and it's just the juice sitting on grape skins and seeds. And that's for the reds, and that's what gives it the tannins and all the phenolics that you're looking for. And last year, it was when we picked our Pinot Noir, it was still in the 80s, which is ideal conditions for fermentation. And next thing you know, we had a wild ferment on our hands, which as a winemaker you don't like because you can't control it. We were able to correct it and it all went fine and dandy, but it's one of those things where we're investing in temperature control things so we can control those sort of outside factors of it just being hotter outside. So that, I would say that's really the only negative of it, but everything else has just been a positive.
Not only is alternative forms like walking and cycling, it's interesting that we consider them alternative when they used to be the only really ways to get around. But first and foremost, they do limit emissions. That's the big one. But then it also just adds a whole other element of health and well-being. And I think it really adds to the vibrancy of the community and makes it more resilient in other ways. So if we can get away from only being able to travel with a single-use vehicle, it makes us more resilient in more ways than one. I'm the Transportation Program Manager at Groundworks Center for Resilient Communities. Transportation in the United States accounts for the largest percentage of greenhouse gas emissions. So at Groundwork, one of the big things that we are advocating for is a passenger train system to Northwest Michigan. So we would really like to connect Northern Michigan to the rest of the state. Currently, there are a few different Amtrak lines in the southern parts of the state that connect really into Chicago and Detroit, but those are really just catering those markets. We would like to see a transportation system that's built for Michiganders, right? For people in Michigan and to connect our towns. It's hard to travel across our own state. If you want to get from Grand Rapids to Detroit, you essentially have to go all the way down to New Buffalo, almost out of the state, and then back up to Detroit. So you have to get on a whole different rail line to get there. So nothing's really well connected, and we would really like to see that change. So we would like to see, wherever you live in Michigan, it's easy to get to one place or another on train. And the reason why is because we feel that it is a more equitable way to get around. When you think about the personal vehicle, not everyone can drive and not everyone can afford to drive. So trains are a really good mode that's more inclusive, I think, of the overall community. And when we also look at trains from an emissions standpoint, like I mentioned before, personal vehicles, especially the large heavy-duty ones, account for the most concentration of greenhouse gases, the types that they emit. From the large vehicles, I think it goes down to aviation after that, then smaller personal vehicles, and then after that, I think you might have buses. At the very bottom of emissions are trains, because they're so efficient in moving lots of people at one time.
The governor set a deadline of yesterday to shut it down, but at this hour, oil is still running through Line 5.
This is not just an up-north issue. The people in the straits are not the only ones affected by this. It's a statewide issue, and frankly, it's a regional issue.
The Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians in northern Wisconsin has filed the lawsuit. The tribe says this litigation follows a failed multi-year mediation process with Enbridge.
But Enbridge is also saying that Line 5 is operating safely, reliably, and in compliance with the law. The state of Michigan has never presented any concrete evidence to suggest otherwise.
I'm the Climate and Environment Program Director for Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities. As the Michigan Climate Action Network, with that hat on, we have commissioned an expert study for the Public Service Commission case that looks at what the impacts of Line 5 are on climate change specifically. Continued operation of the dual pipelines would result in about 27 million metric tons of carbon being emitted for over the projected life of the pipeline. So that's about the equivalent of 10 coal-fired power plants. So it's a huge impact. The economic costs have been projected at about $41 billion from 2027 to 2070. So not only dire environmental consequences, but also really serious economic impacts that are projected for the region if we don't act, to shut down the pipeline and really start to embrace a clean energy economy. So recently, the Public Service Commission made a ruling that Enbridge would need to provide more documentation about the safety of the existing dual pipelines, as well as the tunnel proposal, and essentially have said that Enbridge has failed to prove that the tunnel proposal is safe along with that continued operation. And so they need to address things like, potential explosion risks that have been outlined by experts, damage to cultural resources for the tribe. There are a number of pieces here that really remain unanswered. And every day that goes by, this is a looming threat to the Great Lakes and really to our regional economy. So there are lots of ways that concerned citizens can get involved to shut down Line 5. I think some of the biggest ways that you can be effective right now are upcoming. So we'll have, we're anticipating a decision from the Army Corps of Engineers putting out their latest scoping period. So that'll be a public comment opportunity. We're anticipating with this new decision from the Public Service Commission, we're anticipating additional public comment opportunities. So really keeping an eye out, checking your email for emails coming from any of those three entities, trying to make sure that you're staying on top of public comment opportunities and weighing in every single time to make sure that your interest is being represented with those agencies. Continue to keep politicians accountable. Call up your state senator, your congressional delegation, our congressional delegation, as well as members of the Biden administration. They are key decision makers in this and need to be held to account. So those are some of the main ways to get involved. Of course, there's always volunteer with our organization, donate to help support the work, and stay informed so that you can be an effective advocate.
So as our climate changes and we start to see changes in our ecosystem types, people are going to need to adapt and overcome. And that's, as an organization, what we're trying to help foster is an adaptation to what's ahead of us for communities, environments, and people. This summer we had 8 crews and almost 40 seasonal staff that worked in all 15 counties of the Upper Peninsula doing conservation, restoration, and recreation work. So in less than a decade, our crews have built and maintained over 300 miles of trail. We planted over 80,000 trees, more than 250,000 plugs of native wildflowers, and improved habitat in 2,500 acres of the Upper Peninsula. So over the years, it starts to add up.
When we first heard about the climate reality training, that we both applied, and we both got accepted, and we went. And it's easy to say things are life-changing. The training is life-changing, and simply makes the way I have been living simply not acceptable anymore. I've got to find some new way of living for myself, my own lifestyle, but also helping other people find the way. This is our major exhibit for going to events. What we have found is that with only the two of us, and people want to talk, we are engaged. But we needed some other way for people to be able to walk through an exhibit and kind of self-train. And what we have found is that people can walk through this, spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes looking at each panel, which I have headers up above to give kind of a representation of what's there. Nobody walks through this without finding something astonishing, and that's what we were looking for, and we did that. Luckily, climate science is wonderful. It is. It's a fascinating subject when it's not scary as hell, and so we tried not to be scary here. This is all stuff that should generate hope, and that's why we did it. And we think it's paid off. We think we have done more than our share. But that tells us, frankly, if we're at the point of saying that we need to do more. And I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but if we can't wait for somebody else to do it. I tried to point out that big employers want to go where there is green energy, and they want to go there because young graduates are looking to work for employers who use green energy. All the big employers, all the big high-end employers understand that there's a new class of people that are looking for work, and they want to work in a green environment.
I teach in the College of Business. My specialty is sustainable business and climate change communication. My training really was in environmental conflict resolution and science communication, and I've been able to use that in different areas. I've taught in a College of Engineering, a College of Arts and Sciences, a College of Natural Resources, but I will say it has been really rewarding teaching in a College of Business, where I'm not just preaching to the choir, but I'm actually seen students who take these ideas out into the real world and make them part of their business plan, or take them to their employers and say, hey, where's our sustainability agenda? What is our priority? And so seeing that and how quickly business can be a force for good has been like really empowering and honestly surprising, because I spent a lot of time doing advocacy and policy and law work. So to be in this space at this point in my career, I'm really jazzed. So one of my projects was with the National Park Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuges, and really played with like, what do visitors want to hear? So if you're visiting a place that you love and you're seeing impacts of climate change, how much can we tell you before you get totally bummed out and hit despair? So what we've found, and other research for decades prior can confirm this, but doom and gloom messages don't work, fear appeals don't work, and then like thick science language and jargon doesn't work either. So like right off the bat, we're losing a lot of things that otherwise would be persuasive appeals. And what we do find to work are messages that are empowering, solutions-oriented messages, not just like blind hope and faith, but a lot of messages that connect to what the audience cares about in particular, like what their values are. And so you can look across the political spectrum, you can look across socioeconomic divides, and you can start to see that there's a way to connect the issue with almost everything that someone cares about. So if you're really concerned about the economy, you can talk about how, well, the green stocks are outperforming a standard portfolio, and it's almost 2-to-1 today. And we're seeing like the change in the finance industry. And if you start looking at that data and reveal it to people who might otherwise be fiscally conservative or concerned about economics, concerned that the Green New Deal is going to shortchange America in some way, you can say, actually, this is where the money is. And some of these big, Shell, BP, like they're moving in this direction. And if we could get there ahead of them, that would be great. But there's a way to pivot the science and the concern and the fear into action, and helping each audience member see that it's not so overwhelming that they can't do anything, because we have this finite pool of worry, and there's only like so many things that I can panic about in a day. And if I have to panic about climate change, like I'm done, I'm fried. So how can we link it to things that are proactive, things we are doing, things that do bring us joy, and then use it as an opportunity to say, hey, you are now part of the solution. And immediately, once people see themselves as part of the solution, then they're going to start looking for more solutions and more ways that they can minimize their footprint in their own home, in their community, in their state, in their government.
Bonjour. Sego, April Lindela, Nijna Kasmakanato Dem. Marquette Nunjwa. My name is April Lindela, and I greeted you in Anishinaabe, but I also greeted you in Mohawk. So I'm the adopted daughter of Dorothy Moses Kelly, who was born and raised on the Grand River Six Nations Reserve. And I grew up outside of Detroit, and I came to Northern Michigan University as an undergrad student, but I also fell in love with the Upper Peninsula and Lake Superior. I think because of my love for this place and Lake Superior, but also because of my growing up with a Native mom and going to powwows and attending cultural gatherings and family gatherings, I was also very interested in finding other Native students on campus. So I give you this little bit of historical background to kind of give you an idea that I didn't always live here in this space. That is the Upper Peninsula, right? I come from in and around the Detroit area, and it's very different. And I can't see myself moving back to an urban center because I think we need to have, I personally will speak, I think I need to have trees and water nearby. It helps with so many things in our life. And so when asked about Indigenous wisdom and the connection to climate conversations, Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous worldviews are rooted in values that are connected to the earth. So tribal nations and their languages, Indigenous languages, teach of a worldview that says we are but between the mountain and the ant. And Seneca scholar John Mohawk, that's his saying, and he says that we're in the middle. And you think about the family of ants that work together and how strong they are, but they're itty bitty little beings. And then you think about how we are, but then you think about mountains. How long have the mountains been upon this earth? And some of the native people that I've met believe that rocks and mountains are our eldest teachers. The word in Anishinaabe for teacher is kinomage, but when you translate that, it means earth shows us the way. So the earth is our ultimate teacher. And so I think by understanding and recognizing from that distinct worldview that we're connected to the family of trees, we're connected to the family of birds, we're connected to the family of water beings, we're connected to all the ants and creepy crawlies that grace the face of the earth. When you realize that, there's a sense of humility and a taste of humble pie that comes with that. And so you learn more about the things around you as being in that relationship. What does it mean for a person to go plant wild rice and then harvest wild rice and then eat wild rice? It's a cycle. Just as we have responsibilities, we have rights, but that's our own construction of what a right is. We have responsibilities to the earth. We have responsibilities to the water. So when you think of Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous worldviews as a foundation for having a relationship with the earth, then the climate crisis comes into a different lens. Because it's not solely about what do we need to do to save humankind. It's what do we need to do to save creation? What are our responsibilities to creation? That's where I think people have a struggle, is changing their paradigm to seeing the earth as more than a resource. It's the source. The water is not a resource. It is the source. And so because we're connected to those sources of life, we have to protect and stand up for and give voice in our human voices on behalf of those who don't share that human voice. But they themselves have a right to be here as part of this creation just as much, if not more, because they can outlive us, than we do.
Outdoor education, I think, is an equalizer. The minute you step outside, I find if you scaffold it properly, behavioral issues tend to disappear because you're moving and you're learning and you're not forced to sit and be in a space and you're being, surprised by the little floating fuzzies that are passing you by, distracted in good ways, right? And asking questions then. And when you have a positive relationship with a space, all of a sudden, well, I'm not good at school shifts to, well, I'm not good at that part of school, right? There's a part of school that you can look forward to and you can thrive in and you can be excited about. And that ties into your relationship or your self, view of self as an environmentalist or as somebody who sees the environment as worth protecting, because you have to start thinking about those systems and you have to pull from content knowledge that you're getting in the classroom to make sense of what you're seeing in the outdoor spaces. So I think it's an equalizer. I think it's a connector in that way, because it allows us to thread our sort of, it feels esoteric, whatever, knowledge of like, okay, an ecosystem is, and your definitions and those things that you just have to do in the classroom, to like seeing, oh, okay, well, the geese are over there in the wetland because there's food, because there's creatures, because they're protected by the plants, because etc., etc., and they start putting together those things in an authentic way. And I think to demystify it, or to take away fear that might surround it, you have to be in it, right? And you have to have those things taken away, because you can't care about something if you're afraid of it, or if you don't see it connected to you. And once you connect people to a local outdoor space, they want to protect it. They see the value in it. They've studied it, and now they know it has value.
Everything that I know about learning is that the more experiential, the more place-based, the more connected it is to what people care about, the more it's gonna last. And so, I know this sounds weird coming from like a college professor who stands in a classroom and preaches to a room of people stuck in desks, but the real learning doesn't happen there. And I think to authentically engage our community, it's getting people out in the environment. I think that's the way, because not only do people have all their senses engaged, they're more likely to take a souvenir from that moment that is lasting.
Our teachers, whether they have PhDs, whether they have teaching certificates, whatever that may be within a Eurocentric lens, many of them do not have an understanding of that need to switch paradigms in centering the earth as core to all lessons that need to be shared. This is not to say that we can't have lessons about economics. Let's talk about reciprocity as a form of economics, as opposed to capitalism and consumerism, which is about consume, 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 consume. Where's the idea of conserve and respect and responsibility? That is tied in with reciprocity as an economic framework. So when our teachers don't know what they don't know, how do they know to ask the question, is there an alternative? Indigenous studies provides that avenue to the alternative. And it's rooted in the ancientness of stories that are part of this land. So it makes sense to go to those roots, to go to those that have been here first and ask. We need help, because our planet and all of creation is in crisis. As far as anybody who's a climate denier, a climate crisis denier, those are distractions that our planet doesn't have time for. And Indigenous people who are culturally connected, especially those connected to the language, they know this. And so they move forward regardless.
I remember I actually took my daughter to like the Michigan Climate Change Summit. She was really into climate change activism. Greta Thunberg was just kind of coming out on the main stage of youth activism, and I also saw her like feel overwhelmed. And I also saw how people in the room like look to the next generation, and that weight and that pressure, almost more dangerous than the fear of the world's gonna cave in, you know, day after tomorrow drama, which we also watched with her. And she was like, so when this happens, I'm like, no, this is a Hollywood rendition, don't worry. I'm really sensitive to not scaring children. I also am sensitive to not burdening them with the responsibility. So I think part of my messaging is I'm doing what I can. Like, these were some gifts that I was born with. I can talk to people. Like, that's it. Actually, that is my superpower. It is the thing that I can do, so I'm going to do it every chance I get. And I think when I hear my kids come back and say, cool, what else can we do? Like, should we plant more trees? Should we, how can we save water? How can we use less energy? And I'm like, yes, yes, this is how, let's do it. So much like scared adults, stepping aside from the fear and the doom and gloom and really saying, yeah, but there are all these great things we can do. Like, we can tread a lot lighter on the planet and actually have a really good time. Like, we can bike to the library and get ice cream on the way back and, you know, make a day of it instead of piling in the gas guzzler and driving and idling, you know. So I think there are ways to slow down and have important conversations with your kids, whether they're your students or your cousins, nieces, nephews, or your own, like, actual children, and give them an opportunity to feel empowered and know that it's not, you know, the whole burden is not going to be on their hands, because there are people out there doing what they can. And then the first question my kids have is, okay, what are they doing, and how can I join in? And again, it's that solutions focused.
Sure, it's easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom, but just being a part of this project in itself and hearing about all of the amazing things that people are doing, like professionals, citizens, just like the retired couples, teachers, any other educators, anyone really who are working so passionately on projects such as this one. It's just really inspiring to see what other people are doing, and it makes it less lonely, I guess, because it's so easy to kind of like be an activist and have all of this on your shoulders and think like, I could do more, I need to do this, or I'm not doing enough. But seeing other people and knowing that you do have a support system, that gives me hope.
Thank you.